Well, welcome to day 19 of our Lenten readings. Today, our passage is Mark 11:15 through 19. If you've not had a chance to look at it, please take time to read it, and then you can continue with the video. Jesus has just left Bethany, and he's headed to Jerusalem, and it's getting extremely close to the time that he would be crucified, buried, and then raised from the dead. Jesus comes to a temple and he reacts rather strong. In fact, we see that he overturned the tables of the money changers. He overturned the benches of those selling the doves, and he wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. We know from history that where he was the temple of Gentiles, where the merchants had their booths. Those merchants were basically working for the family of the high priest and making money. We know where it's talked about that he overturned the money changers. What was happening was every year a person would have to pay 1/2 shekel for their offering. But if they didn't have 1/2 shekel, if they had to have their money exchanged, they were then charged 1/24 to exchange that shekel. They were just ripping the people off. Jesus didn't like that and addressed it. He also overturned the table where they were selling doves. Doves were typically the sacrifices that poor people or lepers or women used because that's all they could afford. And what we know in history is that the price of buying a dove was tripled there in the court of the Gentiles. Again, they're ripping the people off. If they even brought their own animals, which they were able to do as a sacrifice, typically what would happen was they would find some kind of flaw or blemish in the animal and not allow them to use that as a sacrifice and force them to buy what was being offered at the booths. Again, Jesus says, we're having nothing of that at all. What was Jesus upset about? He was upset that the court of Gentiles had lost its distinctiveness. In fact, it's interesting, he says that he wouldn't even let them carry merchandise through the temple into the courts. What was happening was that became a shortcut between the city and the Mount of Olives. Again, lost its distinctiveness. Jesus then addresses and says, let me remind you what's to be distinct about my house. And we see this in verse 17, and it says, but my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. A house of prayer. The recognition in prayer is the recognition of God's greatness, the recognition of God's grace. It's also, when we pray, it's a recognition of our need, that we desperately need God, and that He's the one to whom we make our prayers and ask for God's direction. Our challenge for you today would be that you would pray and say, God, may my life reflect your greatness. May my life reflect your grace, not only what I receive, but also what I offer others. And that you would also say, God, may my life reflect my need for you, that I'm not in charge, but you are, more of you and less of me. Thanks for tuning in today. May God bless you and meet your needs today.